ago. It stays strong today and is of extraordinary value to me. And just like in your new book, Primetime Dads, your words always make me laugh and think at the same time, and that's a big accomplishment. I'm so thrilled to see all of you here tonight. I saw Pete Demetrio come in, Tom LaBonge. I thought for sure they'd be at the hockey game, right, over at Dodger Stadium. What are you guys doing here? Come on. And all of you, thank you for coming. A huge thank you to the RTNA as well, not only for tonight, but for the job that got me down here in LA radio. After I was trained as a reporter at KVEN Kayhaven in Ventura by a wonderfully talented news director, Rick Wallace, I was promoted when he left to join KABC Radio. Some of you may remember him. Then after winning a bunch of Golden Mike Awards in that smaller market, I got the attention of the great Don Schrack, the news director of KFWB. He said, come on down, and in 1979 I did. So the Radio Television News Association was there at the beginning of my LA radio career and is now here tonight at the end of it. I recently retired after 34 years in LA radio, and since journalism is such a high energy, adrenaline-rich profession, people come up to me, even tonight they would come up and say, don't you miss it? Well, I certainly miss all of you in this room whom I would see every day in the newsrooms of KNX and KFWB radio, and my friends here tonight from television as well, who some of you worked in radio before you left for other jobs. We worked together, and then all the early morning reporters, producers, and shooters who are here tonight. We mixed a lot of fun into our work days whenever possible, and I certainly miss that too, but do I miss work? Are you nuts? Come on. For all you news managers out here and bosses tonight who never anchored or reported, please listen up right to me. I'm telling it honest. Writing, reporting, interviewing, all that stuff that gets the news on the air fast with all the facts, without screw-ups, is very, very hard to do well. It's really difficult. Now, whether I did it well or not is a matter of opinion, but there's no denying that I made the effort day in and day out, and for that I'm certainly proud of that, because it was a long road. I think back to the wild and wacky, wonderful professionals that I had the pleasure to work with in the beginning of my career. You might recognize some of these names. Judd Rose, do you remember Judd? Rita Cash, Tony Cox, Mark Saban, Chet Douglas, Charlie Brailer, Ed Pyle, Don Wells, Joy Newell, Barbara Essenson, Bill Angel, Don Herbert, Cecilia Pedrosa, just to name a few of those wonderful people who welcomed me in 1979 and taught me how to do this craft. When I was at KFWB earlier, we had a featured program called Reporter Roundup, where all of us would talk about the stories that we covered each day with the afternoon anchors. It was a lively, informative exchange of the facts of the story and what we had to go through to get it on the air, and I still hear that type of program imitated to this day. I got my first desk in the KFWB reporter room next to one of the legends of LA radio, Cleve Herman. I don't know how many of you remember Cleve. Yeah. He did sports, news, anchoring. He also had a radio column called At Large in LA. And he was one of these characters with a capital C. He was a joy to know and to crack jokes with. He always had 1,000 jokes. He also introduced me to lots of his friends, including, for example, the writer and screenwriter, producer, essayist, and teacher of journalism, Norman Corwin. Cleve, if you knew Cleve, he wore a black patch over his blind eye, and he was a throwback to the newspaper battles of LA that he'd had as a print reporter during the years that the city was growing so rapidly after World War II. So here I was, this, at that time, 29-year-old cub reporter. I sat down to work, and suddenly, Cleve launched into a series of phone calls. He might call Mayor Tom Bradley, with whom he went to high school with. He might call his bookie. He was always calling the card clubs to line up a table that night for poker. Then he'd call his wife, Charisse, and then he'd call any number of girlfriends. And from time to time, Cleve would set the wastebasket on fire, and the ashes from his cigarette that he dropped when he couldn't see, his good eye, I can't remember which side it was, but he couldn't see himself dropping the ashes into the waste bucket, and the thing would break into flames. And anyway, we put out a number of wastebasket fires. In those days, we could smoke in the newsroom. We all did, I think. It broke my heart to tell the news director, who was Carol Brashears at that time, that I needed to move to another seat. But if I hadn't relocated, I would have never completed any of my assignments, and certainly wouldn't be here this evening. They would have fired me after I missed all those deadlines. It's the late Washington Post publisher Philip Graham who was given credit for saying that news is the first rough draft of history. Now I submit to you tonight that radio news can shape the direction of that early history for good or bad, given that we frequently are the first to broadcast what we see happening. We're frequently the first on the scene. Now many print and TV journalists are listening to us as they arrive to begin their own reporting. I tried to be honest, objective, accurate, and interested in what I was doing. I had the pleasure of meeting and talking to thousands of people throughout Southern California and putting their opinions on the air, not mine, theirs. And when KFWB switched to News Talk, the always supportive and thoughtful director of news programming, Andy Ludlam, kept me on the air on both KNX and KFWB, and the talented crew sitting near at KNX welcomed me onto their team, and I sure do miss you guys too. Thank you, Andy, and thank all of you at the X. You've been great. Now, when I realized there was just no way I could do yet another holiday getaway story from LAX, I knew it was time to get the hell out of there. One more? How can I do it right? Thanks to my very frugal wife, Frances, and the benefits of that SAG-AFTRA union pension, folks. I had the option to move on to new adventures while I'm still young enough to ride a bicycle and walk my dogs. I've also had time to be a volunteer with a new environmental group called Sea Frog. Yeah, thank you Sea Froggers, thank you. Finally, just a few more thank yous, and I'll get back to the awards. My brother Scott is here. He gave me my first radio disc jockey gig in college at WARC Meadville. He was station manager. Later, we emigrated to California together in that psychedelic hippie bus. My sister Leah and her wife Barbara are great friends, and we've shared so many activities. The current matriarch of the Brooks clan is here, my sister Meredith. She's been our leading example of how to live well and ethically, and thanks to my daughter April, who's here tonight, whom I share so many fond memories of music, camping in the woods, and so much more. Big hug and kiss to Frances. I mentioned to her after 42 years together, we still treasure our love, and anyone who can tolerate a news guy for that long surely deserves to share this award with her. You know, finally, it was the late news service reporter, Helen Thomas, who said, "We don't go into journalism to be popular. It's our job to seek the truth." I'm still searching for the truth, but this award hopefully confirms that after all these years and all my failings, I still have a few friends. You're so very kind. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, once upon a time, television newscasts were live, and there was no videotape, no